The year is 49 BC. Civil war rages across the Roman Empire.
Because Rome is so powerful, it dominated the Mediterranean world.
The violence spills into neighboring Egypt, where a teenage girl is thrust onto the throne of this mystical kingdom. She will go on to become one of the key power players of ancient history. Military might is not the only secret of her success. Sexual temptation alone can't explain it. So how does this iconic queen defy death in a brutal male-dominated age? We investigate the private realm of the last pharaoh of Egypt as we open the mystery files on Cleopatra. For 2,000 years, legends of Queen Cleopatra's love life have inspired countless paintings, plays, and movies. But now scholars are hunting for the real queen and exploring how, against the odds, she mesmerized first Julius Caesar and then Mark Antony, two of Rome's most influential leaders. Cleopatra is born in 69 BC. Eldest daughter of a long line of powerful Egyptian pharaohs. There have been 6 other Queen Cleopatras in the dynasty before her, named after its founder, Ptolemy I. Author Mai Trau has been researching these turbulent times.
Ptolemy is Greek, and he settled in Egypt after the death of Alexander.
Alexander the Great was the Macedonian warlord who conquered Egypt in 332 BC. After his death, one of his top generals, Ptolemy, took over the country.
And from that, the Ptolemaic dynasty lasted for 300 years.
When she is just 18, Cleopatra's father dies. She ascends to the throne and becomes Queen Cleopatra VII, ruling alongside her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIII. Their brother and sister union is customary. Dr. Christopher Snyder has researched the dynasties of ancient Egypt and Rome.
Cleopatra was set up as a consort for her brother Ptolemy, and that is tradition, Egyptian tradition, that it was a way to keep this divine blood within the royal family.
Dr. Debbie Chalice explains how precarious life as a Ptolemaic royal will be.
There's been infighting within the Ptolemies for the last 50 years, if not going back before that.
Betrayal and assassination are a constant risk at court. Cleopatra's own father was one of the few rulers not to have been murdered. And now the teenage queen faces imminent danger from abroad. Across the Mediterranean Sea to the north is one of the most expansionist superpowers in history, Rome.
It dominated the Mediterranean world 2,000 years ago, and the Romans, of course, were incredibly pushy, aggressive, adventurous, and they took their civilization as far as they could to the west and as far as they could to the east, which included Egypt.
At the time of Cleopatra's accession, the empire stretches from the North Atlantic to the eastern Mediterranean. At its heart, Rome. In that great city, Professor Valerie Higgins lectures on ancient history.
There is a slight gap here, and they haven't completely conquered Egypt. They've conquered some of the outer territories of Egypt, but they haven't conquered Egypt itself. But Egypt is progressively being brought into the Roman sphere of influence.
Rome's hold over Egypt is financial. Cleopatra's predecessors had borrowed large sums of money to fund their internal power struggles.
If you were trying to keep in power, like Ptolemy XII, Cleopatra's father, and you wanted to borrow some money to basically pay some troops or to borrow the Roman troops, then you take a massive loan out from Rome.
Fortunately, Egypt is a credit-worthy customer.
Egypt has grain. And remember, the rulers of Rome have got to keep their people happy. And one obvious way of doing it is with food and plenty of it.
Egypt's fertility makes her desired and has also kept her safe.
If you were to make Egypt a full province, you would have to give it a governor. A Roman governor who could, with all the wealth that Egypt had behind it, could actually challenge the leadership in Rome.
If you can keep the native ruler on the throne, a native ruler who is actually a client king, then you've got the best of both worlds.
In Egypt, Ptolemy XIII is one of these client kings. His sister, Cleopatra, is his queen. Rome is getting paid. There is a fragile peace, but it could collapse at any moment.
There had been meetings in the Senate about whether Rome should take over Egypt.
Only 3 years into Cleopatra's reign, a royal power struggle in Egypt gives the Roman dictator Julius Caesar the excuse he needs.
Ptolemy XIII had advisors who kind of instigated a rebellion or a disagreement between the two, and Cleopatra was kicked out.
Cleopatra survives with her life, then flees into exile. Caesar leads his troops into Egypt on the pretext of mediating between the queen and her brother. The only hope for the deposed queen is if she can convince Caesar to take her side. But Cleopatra has nothing to offer Caesar that he can't simply take, apart from one thing: herself. Pat Brown has studied the life and death of Cleopatra.
So the story goes that in order to meet Julius Caesar, she was put into a carpet and rolled up, and they carried her into the palace and then unrolled this in front of Julius Caesar, and out came Cleopatra.
The Greek historian Plutarch records that Caesar is enamored by Cleopatra's wit and overcome by her charms.
Julius Caesar stayed in Alexandria and was forced into a civil war between Cleopatra and her brother, and he did put himself at great physical risk. And many of his friends were wondering why he was involved in this sort of local conflict.
Caesar's involvement is now total. His forces engage the Egyptian army. Cleopatra's nemesis and brother, Ptolemy XIII, dies. But instead of taking over Egypt, Caesar gives it back to Cleopatra and installs her as queen alongside her other brother, Ptolemy XIV. Cleopatra has kept her country and is back on the throne. How she managed to charm a whole nation out of an all-powerful dictator has puzzled historians.
It's very difficult to know exactly where Cleopatra's charm came from. If you look at portraits of her, on her coinage in particular, she looks frankly plain.
But popular legend relates that Caesar fell for Cleopatra simply because she was so extremely attractive.
It's usually hard to tell what people in antiquity actually looked like. And we get written descriptions occasionally, but very seldom do we get realistic portraits on coins and busts and things like that.
Artist India Amos is analyzing images believed to be of Cleopatra to try and produce an impression of what she looked like.
Because this is my profession, drawing portraits, I'd like to say that it was an easy challenge, but it definitely wasn't. I had to look at statues, coins, images on paper, and they were so different and varied. Some were sort of more stylized, for instance, the coins, and then you've got the statues, and they were often broken. Some of them were sort of broken noses or just weathered over age.
India thinks she may have discovered a reason why the coins might appear less attractive to some observers.
Yeah, well, with the side profile, any prominent features, which she certainly has with the hook nose, the flared nostril, quite a kind of prominent bump chin, probably makes her, to some people, less attractive than the softer, rounded feature that you see from the front-on three-quarter profile. I wouldn't say that she was an ugly person, definitely not.
But there is an alternative explanation.
I think the depiction on the coin is really to show her as mannish as possible. After all, the Roman world was male. And the Queen of Egypt has got to appear to be a general just like they were. She was commander-in-chief of her armies, of her navies, and so the male image goes very much with that.
Today, opinions are still divided about whether Cleopatra was as beautiful as her myth claims. But even if she is the most beautiful woman to have ever existed, is the promise of sex with her enough motivation for a highly intelligent and calculating ruler like Caesar to change his entire behavior, lose valuable territories, damage his political standing, and even risk his life?
Now, this is fascinating and very difficult to explain. It can't just be a pretty face. There must have been more than just a physical charm.
Now scholars are focusing beyond her physical appearance and investigating Cleopatra's other attractions.
I think something that's often overlooked is how intellectual Cleopatra was.
Cleopatra spoke Greek and Egyptian, but also languages like Aramaic and Syriac. She was a very well-educated young woman, and it would come to serve her well as Queen of Egypt.
She was a scientist, she was a philosopher. She could debate with the finest Greek minds. She was also undoubtedly the richest woman in the Mediterranean world, and people like Caesar liked that.
Intelligent, sexual, and rich. Cleopatra has several devices she can employ in her seduction, and it works. So far, Cleopatra's attributes have saved her sovereign independence, achieved by seducing Julius Caesar, now a dictator, and therefore the most powerful man in the Roman world. But it is Caesar's very success that will be his downfall. The Roman Republic is strongly anti-monarchist, and Caesar's rule is looking suspiciously like that of a king. The Romans decide the tyrant must go. On the 15th of March, 44 BC, Caesar is assassinated.
After Caesar was murdered, Cleopatra was in a terrible situation. She had nobody there to support her anymore.
Rome's empire is divided again, and later erupts once more into civil war as Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and heir, goes head-to-head with one of Rome's most formidable and successful generals, Mark Antony.
Octavian and Mark Antony were two very different individuals. Octavian was not a soldier. He was an astute politician, a very careful and very modest man. Antony was a larger-than-life figure. He was a great soldier, a great lover, a great friend to many of his fellow soldiers.
In a rerun of the earlier Roman conflict, Cleopatra's Egypt is a key battleground. Antony petitions the Queen to support his side. Again, Cleopatra wants to keep her throne and retain Egyptian sovereign status. And again, she has nothing to bargain with that Antony can't already take by force, apart from herself. For the second time, Cleopatra must seduce one of the most powerful people in the world.
She's definitely putting herself out for Mark Antony to dazzle him as much as anything else. She's got a lot to lose if she doesn't do that.
Those sumptuous banquets that Cleopatra held on her barge, where she takes off one of her earrings, one of the largest pearls ever recorded, and dissolves it in a glass of wine, literally conspicuous consumption. This is something that overawed the Romans, the sheer opulence of it all.
Cleopatra has added extravagance, excess, and gluttony to her list of enticements to lure Mark Antony. Displays of wealth and lavish offers of food are intoxicating, effects that go far deeper than cultural or historical contexts. At New York University, Dr. Lucy Brown has scanned the brains of subjects who are receiving sexual, financial, and gastronomic positive stimuli.
And what we'll look at is the change in his brain activity in different regions, and we'll extrapolate from that the different brain systems that are involved.
Yeah, that's good. Perfect.
Great.
Dr. Brown's results reveal that the reaction in the brain to sexual stimuli is similar to the arousal provoked by the promise of food and money. These inducements trigger deep neurological effects that transcend culture and the passage of time, and would have worked the same way 2,000 years ago.
Keeping the reward system active is what Cleopatra was doing by providing all of these wonderful contexts for Caesar and Mark Antony.
Cleopatra's technique is a stage-managed concert of pleasures.
It's all carefully planned. She uses her money, she uses her sexuality. Everything is orchestrated. The hair, the dress, the perfume that she uses, and all of it is very calculating.
Yet historians have identified a stranger aspect of Cleopatra's seduction of Caesar and Mark Antony. Perhaps the key component of her legend as a magical Eastern temptress. Is it possible the Romans, like Egyptians, believed that a pharaoh is a god in human form?
I think we sometimes underestimate how superstitious the Romans were.
If Antony himself regards Egypt's rulers as divine, then perhaps he is also convinced he is now conducting intimate relations with a living goddess.
They believed in gods and goddesses, they were real.
The Romans regularly perform rituals to stay in their favor.
And here we have an Egyptian society with tremendously powerful gods who have been around forever, it seems.
By the time of Cleopatra's reign, Egypt was already an ancient civilization. Incredibly, the 21st century is closer to the Roman era than the Romans were to the building of the pyramids. How these billion-ton creations were ever erected is already an enigma to the Romans. In an age of deep religious conviction, Romans would have been in awe of Egypt's mystical past and of the bizarre gods that watch over Cleopatra.
We think in terms of hawk heads and crocodile deities. They are frightening. There is that kind of supernatural malevolence somehow, I think, from Egypt.
To the Romans, Egypt is mysterious, exotic, and frightening.
I think it was scary. I think we have to imagine that most people in the ancient world were what today we would call superstitious.
Plutarch tells us how Cleopatra plays on Antony's spiritual beliefs in the way she presents herself to him.
She appears before him as the female goddesses of both Egypt and Greece. Isis, who's the goddess of fertility, the greatest goddess in the Egyptian mythology, is fused with Aphrodite, the goddess of love.
But some scholars argue this is more than fantasy role-playing, and that Antony may view Cleopatra to be, at least in part, supernatural. Evidence lies in the deep-rooted psychological and religious attitudes of Romans. Investigations into the works of Horace, a major Roman poet, alive and writing while these events are unfolding, reveals clues of what Romans really thought 2,000 years ago. Latin scholar Dr. Paul Gwynne is analyzing the language Horace uses to describe the seduction of Antony by Cleopatra.
Horace writes in such a sophisticated way. There is not one word in any of his poetry that is not thought about, that is not placed with care and attention.
He has noticed a few of these carefully chosen words in Horace's description of Cleopatra.
We see her as, in the very center of the poem, a fatale monstrum. Now, how you translate the word fatale monstrum is always difficult. Both the words separately have religious connotations. Fatale means death-dealing, fatal in the sense that it's fateful. Monstrum is something to be admired and wary of, and also at the same time a monster, something that's out of the ordinary.
As Horace describes Cleopatra as monstrum, from where the modern word monster derives, it implies he considers her outside the ordinary, exotic and alien.
In terms of whether Mark Antony believed he was sleeping with somebody divine, I think it's so difficult for us to think like that, given we're so rational now.
It's very tempting in our modern cynical world to think that key players like Caesar, like Mark Antony, were above such things. That they were actually very hard-bitten, very cynical, very clever, and merely paying lip service to all that. I don't think that's true. I think that's to misunderstand what the ancient world is all about. They were brought up to know nothing else.
The research indicates that Caesar and Antony might well believe Cleopatra to really be a goddess. It's an irresistible backup to her master plan.
I think we're looking at a combination of factors here. You've got her sense of physical presence, her beauty, which would have been accentuated by makeup and clothes and hairstyle and so on. You've got her ability to speak umpteen languages and to entertain. You've got her sexuality. You've got her power. She was pharaoh of Upper and Lower Egypt. Put that lot together, and you have got something that adds up to a charm. Factor in this woman is, I think that to people like Caesar, to people like Mark Antony, this would have been enormously powerful.
Her seduction of Antony complete, the pair form a partnership. Antony gaining the wealth of Egypt, Cleopatra keeping her life, her throne, and Egypt as an independent nation. Paid for with Egyptian riches and fed on Egyptian grain, for a while Antony and Cleopatra's armies hold off those of their enemy Octavian. But at what price?
The conservative Octavian would have used Cleopatra's ostentatious lifestyle against Mark Antony. He would have, back in Rome, been trying to convince the Roman people that the solid soldier Mark Antony was being seduced by the evil temptress from the east.
In the end, his countrymen turn against him, and even with the resources of Egypt, Antony cannot stand up to the sheer military might of Rome. On the 1st of August, 30 BC, when Cleopatra is 39 years old, she and Antony surrender. Rather than be captured by Octavian and dragged to Rome in chains, Antony and Cleopatra commit suicide. Octavian takes over Egypt and imposes direct rule from Rome. The country finally becomes just another Roman province. The land will not be solely under Egyptian control for another 2,000 years. Egypt's last queen is dead, but she has survived far longer than expected.
Having both Julius Caesar and Mark Antony as lovers enabled Cleopatra to both hold on to power and to extend her power for many years, beyond what any Egyptian woman perhaps had ever done.
Yet, even in death, Cleopatra's hold over the Roman imagination is as strong as ever. It is common in the classical world to destroy images of conquered enemies. The Greek biographer Plutarch records that although Octavian orders the tearing down of Mark Antony's statues, Cleopatra's are to be left standing. Octavian then arranges for a lavish display bearing the spoils of Egypt and an effigy of Cleopatra to be paraded through Rome during his victory procession. Plutarch writes that Octavian is bribed into leaving the statues of Cleopatra unharmed. Might it be that he too, knowing how she was revered as a goddess by her people, may have been enthralled by the larger-than-life legend of Cleopatra, as the world still is today?